In this video, I'm going to show you how to place the master cylinder on this Ram 2500. It's located on the driver's side of the engine compartment, all the way on the firewall, so let's get started. On the driver's side towards the firewall, you'll find the master cylinder reservoir. Let's remove that cap and remove the fluid that's in it. Typically, it says on the cap what type of brake fluid this takes. However, in our case, it says it right on the reservoir. Back here, this system takes .3 brake fluid. You want to make sure you have plenty on hand because this system takes quite a bit of brake fluid, so be prepared. Use whatever you have that'll remove this old fluid. I'm using a vacuum pump, but you can use a fluid transfer pump or a manual fluid extraction pump. Whatever you have that'll get the fluid out of here. There's an electrical connector that goes on this level sensor. We have to unplug it. And the best way to do it is to get a pick and pick out the lock on the backside. I'll show you what it looks like once I get it off. It's a little bit recessed into the hole of this master cylinder. So there we go, I just pulled it off. And now I'm able to press on the tab with that pick and disconnect the electrical connector. This is what it looks like if you look at it. You have to pull this red tab up, and then this is the tab you press on to actually disconnect the connector. Pull this out of the way. There is still fluid left, not only in the reservoir a little bit, but also in the master cylinder. You can never get 100% of it out. So when you break these lines free, fluid will leak. Having said that, you want to put absorbent pads or whatever you have underneath that'll catch this fluid. That way you make sure it doesn't get all over your engine and of course all over the paint or even the ground. Let's use a 12mm wrench. I recommend a flare nut wrench. Looks like this. It has a little bit more grip than a regular wrench. To break this free, you can then switch to a regular wrench if you want to. Doing that avoids potentially stripping out this fitting because a regular wrench can do that if this is very tight and you have to fight it back and forth. My fitting spins freely, which is great. Sometimes, it's not very often that this happens on master cylinders, but sometimes the fitting gets stuck on the line and it'll actually twist the line with it. In that case, you're going to want to work it back and forth, maybe with some rust penetrant, get it to break free. You don't want to break a line and have to make or buy a new one. Let's just unthread this all the way. And keep in mind, once again, especially on this front line, quite a bit of fluid will leak out as soon as it's unthreaded. And there we go. Now the lines are hard lines here, and further down they are stainless steel braided lines. So I do actually have some wiggle room in these. I can pull this line away. Let's do the same to the line in the rear. And there goes this one. To remove this reservoir, there are two tabs, one on each side, here and here, that have to be pried out as the reservoir gets pulled up. Now you don't want to damage the reservoir, of course, because we are reusing it. So try to pry one side and wiggle it. There are rubber grommets holding it and sealing it in. So, and it's naturally going to want to pop right back in place as you do this. So it might take a little bit of time and trial and error. And sometimes it's even more efficient if you get a pry bar and apply just a tiny bit of pressure on those tabs with the pry bar, maybe a screwdriver, whatever you have that'll do the job. Okay. All right, there we go. That popped out of one. All right, there's the reservoir. These are the tabs, and these two ports go into these two rubber grommets. This is the top bolt that holds the master cylinder onto the brake booster. You'll find that the nut on the backside is actually what we have to remove first because the bolt is actually threaded into the master cylinder with reverse threads. So if you try to turn this counterclockwise, you're actually tightening it into the master cylinder. So the mounting nut is what we have to get at first. Use a 14mm wrench for that and unthread it. This can be a little tricky and difficult to reach. Do your best to get this broken free. All right, that's off. The master cylinder is not held on at the top anymore, so let's go to the bottom. This is what you'll see at the bottom, another 14mm mounting nut, because this hardware is actually mounted backwards. So the bolt that you see going in from the backside is threaded into the booster, not on the master. Unthread this. Now you can take the master, slide it off, and there it is. Inspect the mounting surface of the master. Mine looks like it's lubricated with anti-seize, so someone must have replaced this master recently. So I'm gonna leave it. Typically, I would clean up any corrosion that's here and add a little bit of anti-seize. Now slide the new master into position, just like that. And let's start mounting it up with the mounting nuts. Install the 2 mounting nuts back onto those studs. Nice and tight. The torque on these two is 18 foot-pounds. I cannot torque them because I just cannot fit my torque wrench in here, but 18 foot-pounds is not a lot. Give it about an 1/8 to a 1/4 turn after they bottom out and get snug. That should be plenty tight for these. These are also locking nuts, so it's not like they're gonna back off by themselves. Take the reservoir, slide it over the clips and over these grommets with the 2 ports. If there's a little bit of brake fluid on these rubber pieces and the grommets, that actually helps because it'll allow this to slide in. Press, keep constant pressure, and wiggle it. It's locked in on here, and that's it. It's normal for it to move around, but it's obviously not normal for it to be up and too high off the master cylinder. As long as the 2 side clips are clipped in, you're good to go. It is locked in. I have the bleeder lines that I made here out of the fittings that came with the master cylinder. The 2 plugs that were in these ports were threaded, so all I did was drill them through and installed some clear plastic tubing. You can make these lines out of regular brake line if you want, and with the appropriate fitting, you can clamp it on here, and this is what I'm going to use to bleed the master cylinder now that it's installed. I'm going to thread these on all the way, and this will allow me to get all of the air out and push the fluid through and get it ready to put the lines on. Now, of course, we will lose some fluid once these get disconnected and the lines get put on, but that's all right. I'm just looking to get most of the air out so that we don't push it through the lines and through the ABS module. I'm going to install both fittings, and keep in mind the rear fitting is larger. It's got a bigger diameter and different thread pitch. Just tighten these by hand, stick the end of the hose into the master cylinder, or the line if you're using a hard line. Now let's top it off with clean .3 brake fluid. All right, I'm not gonna go all the way up completely. I went most of the way up. So at this point, I'm gonna get inside the vehicle, slowly push the brake pedal all the way until it hits the floor. And then once it does hit the floor, I'm gonna leave it there for 3 to 4 seconds and then slowly release. That cycle is going to push fluid through the lines, and any air that's stuck, it'll exit inside the reservoir, air will bleed out, fluid will get pulled back in when I release the brake pedal, and that cycle will repeat over and over until we see no more air through these clear lines. I personally like having these clear lines instead of actual brake lines because I can see exactly what's happening and how much is flowing through. Once again, very slowly depress the pedal all the way to the floor. There will be no resistance, that's normal. And slowly let it go. All right, it looks like this is clean. I do see a couple tiny little bubbles of air, but honestly, we're gonna have to disconnect these bleeder lines anyway, so air will get in. It's just a matter of bleeding the internals of the master cylinder, and this is perfectly fine right here. So I'm gonna stop, let's disconnect those lines, put on the actual brake lines, and then of course get on with our job. I have some absorbent pads underneath because brake fluid will leak out of this line and out of the port as I remove this bleeder line. And I want my actual brake lines ready to go in position because this master cylinder flows very fast, flows a lot. You'll see it's going to pour out of this port. So be careful, be quick. There we go. Get this started. Once you get it started, it will still leak, but it's not going to pour out, it'll drip out. Make sure that this is threading on nice and smooth, because if it's not, that means it's cross-threading. You definitely want to avoid that, otherwise you'll be ruining the threads inside your brand new master cylinder. Okay, that's bottomed out. I'm going to put my wrench on here with it bottomed out. I'm going to give it 1/8 of a turn. That's it. I just want to squish that fitting a little bit, or the flare actually behind the fitting. That's what's going to get it nice and tight, sealed up. Okay, time for the front line. Same thing. Be quick, because this one also goes just as fast. Yep. Okay, that's bottomed out. Give it a little extra, and that's tight. The lines are reconnected fully. I'm going to clean this all with a brake parts cleaner because I don't want any residue here, and of course if you spilt anywhere, clean that up as well. Now let's plug this connector back in, line it up, press it, make sure it clicks, and lock the tab. Now top off the master cylinder with some .3 brake fluid. I'm going to bring it all the way up to the max line, so fill it up, reinstall the cap. That way debris and moisture don't get in. The bleeding sequence on this truck starts at the right rear wheel, goes over to the left rear. Then you should top off the master cylinder after doing the 2 rears. You move on to the right front. That's the passenger side in the front. And then last caliper in this sequence is going to be the left front, the driver's side. Now it is recommended that you repeat the sequence twice, so top off the master cylinder and go around again. I have an assistant in the vehicle ready to pump up the brake pedal. They're going to pump a few times and then hold pressure. Then I'm going to crack the bleeder open. Before I do that, I'm going to remove this cap, and I have a little hose that I'm going to attach to it. That way I direct the brake fluid right into my collection receptacle. I'm going to use a 10mm wrench to break the bleeder screw free. They're holding pressure, and here we go. All right, go again. Okay, they're holding again, so I'm going to crack this open. And as soon as it reaches the floor, I'm going to close this and go ahead and pump again.
Hold it.
Okay, they're holding. I'm going to open this up. I'm not seeing any air bubbles. Let's do it one more time just to be safe. The fluid is also getting clearer, which means there's new brake fluid coming in from the master cylinder. You want to do this until you either have nice clean fluid or you see no more air bubbles, or both.
Hold it.
Okay. All right, close this off. You can let go now. I'm going to remove my hose. There we go. If you spilt any, go ahead and clean all this up. Use brake parts cleaner. And of course, once it's all dried up, you want to cap the bleeder screw off if you have the cap still. That way it doesn't get clogged up with debris. At this point, you're going to move over to the left rear, do the same procedure over there, and then of course top off that master cylinder to make sure it stays full. I topped off my master cylinder and I am now at the right front caliper. This is going to be our 3rd one in our sequence. So same thing, assistance in the vehicle, ready to pump up the brake pedal. I'm going to stick my hose on here so I don't make a mess. And with a 10mm wrench, I'm going to break this free when the time comes. All right, they're holding pressure, so crack this open. Perfect. Okay, go again.
Hold it.
Okay, they're holding, crack this open. Let the pedal go down. All right, pump again.
Hold it.
Okay. All right. It's looking better. Let's do this one last time. Go ahead and pump.
Hold it.
Okay, crack this open. All right, this is all clean, fresh fluid, no air bubbles. You can let go of the brake pedal now. Use some brake parts cleaner and clean off anything that leaked. And unfortunately, this caliper did not have a little rubber plug for the bleeder screw, but if yours did, go ahead and put it back. Now move over to the left front and do the same steps. Now top off the master cylinder one last time. If you think you need to repeat the process, go ahead and bleed again in the same sequence until you're happy with how the brake pedal feels and you have no air in the system. Once you're done, put the wheels on. The front wheels get torqued to 135 foot-pounds and the rears get torqued to 150 foot-pounds.
When only the best will do, demand TRQ. The only company that lets you view before you do. TRQ is committed to offering the highest quality aftermarket auto parts that are engineered for peace of mind. Thanks for using and viewing with TRQ.